Yeah, if they press record, yeah, Yvonne is
I've done that. Yvonne has
Yeah.
done that. Okay, thanks.
okay. Got it. Very good. So there's what is known as a focused interview. And basically, when you are dealing with a focused interview, you want to focus attention on the given experience of a respondent and its effects. So, for example, if you have undergone a certain experience, divorce, for example, you want to get everything the person, the respondent has undergone. So you focus attention on that given experience. How was divorce for you? So you, the interviewer, has freedom to decide the manner and the sequence of the questions to elicit the reasons and motives, but the task is to ensure that you get all the information you can from the interviewee. So it's called a focused interview. How you ask the questions, you determine order, sequence, whatever it is that you use, but it is focused because there is something of interest to you. It is a specific thing that you're interested in. If you are interested in a certain behavior, and that behavior, maybe somebody has aborted, for example, and you wanted to find out, so what prompted you to want to get rid of the fetus? At what point did you make this decision? Did you tell anybody? Did you confide? You can ask all manner of questions, but it is focused because there's that thing, the information that you need. That's why we call it a focused interview. And it's basically an interviewing technique, a focused interview. Moving on. Okay, and all these are also techniques. A clinical interview is where you're collecting history as a clinician, and a lot of you psychologists, you will be doing clinical interviewing where you want to determine historical information about a certain issue. So it's called a clinical interview as it relates to a certain experience. So what are you suffering from? When did it start? And there is some historical information that you're interested in as it relates to something that they're going through, and that is a clinical interview. Then a non-directive interview is almost the opposite of a focused interview. The focused interview, there is what you wanted. You are very focused on something. And directed interview is what Freud called free association, where you're trying just to get somebody to open up and talk. Choose a topic that you feel like you want to share, and go with it. And so what, as an interviewer, you do is just find out what it is that they want to talk about. Freudians are very happy with free association. They say that it is a very nice way of breaking the ice. And from this non-directed interview, you might get certain things or certain ideas that might direct you to what might be the problem a person is facing. So again, a non-directive interview is basically free association. Not very good if you are a counselor per se, but might be good maybe on the first day of counseling when people are not quite sure whether they want to talk to you, whether they're ready to talk to you. There are times, I know as a school counselor, for example, students are sent to you by either the head teacher or by the deputy or by the discipline master, and you don't know what the problem is. So the best way to get them to start talking is using a non-directive interview and just encourage them to talk. and you just talk. Minimal interruptions from your side as the interviewer, but allow them to express themselves. But then over time, you might get certain things that might lead you to a more focused type of interview. All right. These were the advantages of the interviews. Next slide. And there are quite a number. So there is greater depth of information, which is true. You cannot compare the information you get from interview as compared to what you get from questionnaire. Questionnaire, you just ask a question, you get one word answer, you just get a statement. Basically, people don't expound, but from an interview, you can seek for expounding. People ask people to please elaborate, please tell me more. Then sometimes resistance can be overcome by a skilled interviewer. Generally, when interviewee or when a respondent sees a question they don't like on a questionnaire, they might decide they won't answer. And so you have those blanks, which we call non-response. But when it's in an interview scenario, and you're asking somebody, what is your body count? Like you want to find out how many people they've had sex with. And before they start saying, that's too personal, there is a way in which a skilled interviewer can be able to get that information, either by rephrasing it or by taking time going to more easier topics, then coming back to this hard question. So you have less blanks, less non-response when you're dealing with interviews. Then there is greater flexibility. Here is where you have the opportunity to restructure questions. Observation method can also be applied in recording verbal answers. And here we say that you can be able to see the non-verbal, the nuances, the behavior of the person, how the uneasiness, all that is recorded over and above the response that they give. Then you can get personal information a lot easier, and possibility of spontaneous responses, that's more honest responses. And again, you can tell by the spontaneity, boy, my Nyeri language, the spontaneity of the responses, how spontaneous are they, what's the reaction time? So again, those are real advantages of the interview method. Waiting for the forward button, or should I be saying next? Okay, disadvantages, again, as we had alluded, it is expensive. Remember, you're meeting one person at a time. So it is going to be very expensive and also time consuming, which is number 4. It is open to biases sometimes, biases of the interviewer or biases of the respondent. Interviewer biases sometimes when an interviewer doesn't quite like you for whatever reason. I mean, they're human. They might just decide they're fed up with your shrub, or they're fed up with your bad language. Have you ever tried to interview somebody who speaks a language that you hardly understand? And sorry to say, but sometimes when you're speaking to Ethiopians who have very little English, it is so difficult, you get so tired. So as an interviewer, you might be wanting to get over with it. But that doesn't also stop there. A respondent might not like you. They might not like that you're white. They might not like that you're black. They might not like that you wear glasses. They might not like your breath. They might not like your accent. They might not, and all those, there are times when you're dealing with a respondent and you can clearly see disinterest, how they sit, how they respond, like they are not enthusiastic. They're just, when will this be over? So again, all those will provide biases, whether from the interview or the respondent. So under the interview method, the organization required for selecting, training, and supervising the field staff is complex with formidable problems. So again, you need to train people on how to interview. And if you have more than one research assistant, are you sure that you don't have inter-rater variability? How are you sure that these people who will be collecting data for you are going to be the best they can ever be? And so that they will not introduce any bias to the results. Okay, then another disadvantage is that you'll need to be very good at it. If you don't manage to establish rapport at the very beginning, then chances of getting frank responses is very hard. If the respondent doesn't trust you, if the respondent doesn't view you as a friendly person, and they're scared of you, it might actually just spoil how the interview goes. So sometimes interviews work, sometimes they go really south. Yeah. And some of you or all of you at some point become counselors, and this is something you will definitely encounter when you meet somebody and they don't like you for no reason. They've just entered your office and they have decided they don't want you. And so if that is the case, you will be trying to get information from them and they will be just creating some wall around them. And I'm sure if we asked Lydia, who's a counselor here, she might give you of various examples maybe she's faced, and how well you need to be skilled, your counseling skills, your helper skills to try and break some of these barriers. Yeah, and even parents, we face that. Sometimes you're talking to your children and they stonewall you. They are disinterested. You look at their body language and they are disinterested, and it becomes very difficult for any communication to take place. Okay, moving on. Then questionnaires, and this is where a lot of you will want to go through. It's usually a safe haven for a lot of students. Why? Because questionnaires are cheap, easy to administer, like they are already there. Many times you can search online and get a questionnaire that is useful. So basically, a questionnaire is that set of questions that it's an instrument that contains questions which will help you, the researcher, understand a certain phenomena that is of interest to you. You might give it to people on one-on-one. For example, if you can get them in way of a class, you can send it by post. Nowadays, we have Survey Monkeys and Google, they're called Google Docs. Yeah. You
Google
can
Forms.
Sorry, you said?
Google Forms.
Google Forms, okay. They are online questionnaires which you can answer from the comfort of your device, whether it is a laptop or it's a phone, and you answer the questions and you quickly send. And all those are questionnaires. They tend to save on time. They can save on money. And because again, you don't have to visit all these people. And now you can imagine with online questionnaires, you can save even on paper. Yeah, so means that it is very cost effective. Obviously, a challenge here is that questionnaires only lend themselves to literate populations. Yeah, your population has to be able to read and write. So if your population is not literate, is not totally literate, then a questionnaire is not an option. You'd have to think of a better way of reaching out to them. Okay, then some other challenges would be, what is the length of the questionnaire? If the questionnaire is too long, sometimes it could tire people. And so when people get tired, there's what is known as a response. I don't know what they call it, where people just tick things without even reading the questions, just tick, 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 and that is dangerous. There are also cases of people just leaving blanks, again, because maybe it was too long. So you'll need to be very careful that when you write your questionnaire or when you select your questionnaire, you select a good questionnaire that will keep your respondents engaged to the end. And that's the only time that it's going to be useful, that you'll get useful information. An advantage of a questionnaire is also it lends itself to anonymity. A questionnaire is easily anonymous, doesn't ask a person about the name, and hopefully would give the respondent confidence that their identity is concealed. So yeah, it has advantages, it has its disadvantages. Okay, moving on. So merits, low cost, free from interview bias. Number 3 is not a merit, that's actually a demerit. Misunderstanding of questions. And we have alluded to it that you have no chance to actually correct if you have misunderstood a question. Then respondents have adequate time to think through their answers, which is partly true. Who are not easily approachable can be reached conveniently. So again, if people are far and wide, there are ways, and especially if you can pass to them an online link, then you can have a very, very large sample. Again, because you can cheaply just reach so many people at the same time. All merits, number 3 is basically not a merit, should not be there. Next slide. Demerits, and the key demerit is basically non-response, when people leave blanks, or if you have posted it, low rate of return when people don't post the questionnaire back. Then they need to be literate, so we are saying respondents need to be educated and cooperative. It has some form of inflexibility. The questions remain the way they are. If they don't understand, too bad. Then the possibility of ambiguous replies or omission of items. And number 5 can be slow is also, if you have a low rate of return, then that would make the process slow when you're struggling to get people to respond. But then the converse is also true, it can be very fast. If you go to a university type setting, you give your questionnaires and you wait for them, and 15 minutes later, you have hundreds of questionnaires filled and ready for documentation. So it can be a fast method, can also be a slow method. Next. So these are just key features of a questionnaire. And one, it needs to be very carefully constructed. Since you are not there generally for the questionnaire, which is self-administered, it needs to have kind of a life of its own. So you'll need to construct it very well. You'll need to determine which is the best order of questions. How you move from questions that are general to questions that are more personal. So that don't start with the very personal upfront, because they could easily upset the taker. So how you order the questions is of importance. So its general form, the question sequence, question formulation, and wording of the questions. Again, all those are key. Don't use very complex words. Yeah, because again, if people don't understand the words, there is an issue. I don't know if I mentioned in this class of study questionnaire we were doing. It's called the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. I think I talked about it in this class. And Professor Robert Goodman, who is the author of the questionnaire, asked us to make a common questionnaire for both Kenya and Tanzania. And when we did the initial questionnaire for Kenya, remember I was at the Kenyan coast, and basically Kenyan coastarians speak some of the best Swahili within Kenya. Then the Tanzanians also did their translation of the questionnaire. When I looked at the Tanzanian version, I was like, oh my God, this is not Kiswahili. This is a new language whatsoever. You know, like the word questionnaire, as we still called it the SDQ questionnaire. The Tanzanians had called it Dodosa, La Ungumu Dodosa la ungumu and it was strengths and difficulties. And I was like, who even translated the word questionnaire into Kiswahili? It's a Dodosa. And they had words for some of the words they used. Kufurukuta. Kenyans don't furukuta. Kunyogonyea. We don't nyogonyea. You know, like the words were so difficult, but basically we opted for the simpler version. We passed the word and they said, actually, there are people in Tanzania who will understand our version, but generally, a lot of Kenyans would not have understood their version. So opt for simpler words. Don't go for the big bombastic words. The simpler, the better, so that anyone reading has a chance to quickly understand what the questions are about. Moving on. So when you're thinking about the general form of the questionnaire, think about the questions. Do you want them structured or unstructured? Structured are those which you have definite, concrete, predetermined questions. And the beauty of structured also, they tend to be, you can opt for close-ended questions. And close-ended questions are the ones where the respondents have to give one of several options that are given. So if you ask them gender, male, female, and maybe sometimes that you'll be like, do not want to say. So that is close-ended. What is your age group? And you provide several age groups. What is your marital status? And you provide certain marital statuses. So those are closed and people will pick whatever it is. When it's open, you ask a question and you provide space for people to fill. So when it comes to analysis, obviously the closed-ended are easier than the open-ended, because the open-ended will lend themselves to people to write compositions and passages. And so you have to read through those passages to make sense of what it is that they wanted to say. So structured, as we had said before, it has a certain definite predetermined questions and predetermined order of questions, whereas unstructured is fairly open. Closed and open, we have said. Closed, you restrict the respondents to a set of responses. Open, it's open and you're inviting them to share experiences through passages or compositions. That's in general form. Another thing about the questionnaire, moving on next. Okay, I am not seeing anything new here. Still talking about structured and unstructured. We can move on. The question sequence, yes. So how do you sequence your questions in a questionnaire? So again, you need to think about what is the best sequence. And remember, this is information that is being given to you in case you're constructing a questionnaire. However, if you go and you dig and you get a questionnaire that has already been developed, it is in existence, then you don't need to change the sequence. Just use the sequence, because we want to imagine that the creator or the author of the questionnaire thought about the sequence and ended up with that sequence that you have in the questionnaire. So, sorry, a good sequence is one which is clear and there is a proper build-up, you know, as the questions run from one question to the other, there is a nice build-up. Questions that establish rapport and gain cooperation of the respondents are good, come in early. Then the difficult or personal questions should come later. Don't bring them too early. If your first question is gender, male, female. Age, what? Do you have a boyfriend? Age. When was the last time you had sex? How many sexual partners? Hey, yeah. People will run away. So there are certain topics where you want to, in a sense, bring the person in, like slowly usher them in, asking them questions that don't raise a lot of anxiety, and you create rapport. Then the more difficult and the more personal questions come later, and by that time they're already feeling at ease. They know you a lot better, and they feel they've already come too far. So this is going towards the end, so let's just answer anyway. So a sequence is very important. Next. Wording formulation, I cannot belabor. I have said that try and remove ambiguity. Sometimes people ask questions that are double-barreled. A double-barreled question is whatever you answer. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example of a double-barreled question. I can't think of one, but it's a type of question where if you answer the question, you're not sure whether you're answering to the first part or you're answering to the second part. So there are times you ask a question and it has two parts, and in your head you think you know what you're asking, but when somebody thinks about it, there are some people who will be responding thinking about the first part, and there are some people who will be answering thinking about the second part. Okay, I've thought of one. So I teach two courses. I teach research methods and I teach statistics. So you ask a question. In statistics, 6003, and research methods, 6002, which course is Dr. Kihara better and why? And that is actually not even totally double-barreled. Oops. I'll think of one and I'll throw it to you. I'll throw it to your chat. You'll see how the double barrel, it is so ambiguous. So when you think about the question, when you answer, you're like, wait, you have put too many things. Why don't you break the question into two? Okay, so if you are translating questions from one language to another, ensure that they retain the original meaning. That is important. Then try and remove bias in the way you answer questions. There is some questions that, in a sense, sound biased. Okay. Should be easily understood, we have stated. Should be simple, one idea at a time. Yes, that's how you remove the ambiguity. Should be concrete. Okay. Form questions may be multiple choice, or form of question should be, okay, multiple choice or open-ended, and we talked about that. All right, so basically, I think the keyword there is simple is key. So schedules are forms of questionnaires, but unlike normal questionnaires, the schedule is actually answered by the enumerator. The enumerator is you, the investigator. So you have a questionnaire, but it is not self-administered. Remember, the normal questionnaire is self-administered. It is the respondent who actually responds to the questions. However, a schedule is, in as much as it's a questionnaire, the person who answers or the person who writes out the answers is the enumerator. and a specifically trained person who is appointed to do that job. Schedules tend to be very, very, very long. And so they could easily tire the respondent. And so what the enumerator does is that they help make things easy. A case in point is sensors. When those census guys came to your homes, if they did, they had questionnaires, but you didn't fill those questionnaires yourself. There was an enumerator. And this enumerator makes the process very easy. They know what questions to jump in case they do not apply, so that you don't have to go through each and every question. They don't bog you down. They can quickly take you through, but they have to be highly trained. You can see that last bullet. Enumerators must be trained in administering the schedule. Yeah, so remember, a schedule is a questionnaire, but the questionnaire that is answered. It's you who's answering, but the person who is filling in the form is the enumerator. And they're usually much longer, very detailed, but you have that trained person who will help you fill it out. Next. Other methods of data collection, there are many, many, many ways data is collected. Those are just examples: warranty cards, distributor or store audits, consumer panels, mechanical devices, depth interviews, content analysis, objective tests. Yes, Faith?
I have a question on the schedules.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so now that it's a form of questionnaire, but it's collected by an enumerator. So
Yeah.
I wonder, when you have a questionnaire that is administered probably to, okay, first of all, is it okay to have a questionnaire administered to people who cannot read?
Well, you'd have to use the enumerator method. But
Okay.
now the challenge you have with people who cannot read is, in what language will the questionnaire be?
Oh, okay. So say it's in English.
Okay. So generally, if you're not literate, chances are that you'll never be able to understand English much.
Mm.
But that's not totally true, because we have illiterate Englishmen. There are people who are English by origin, but they're illiterate. So they can speak English, but they can't read or write.
Yes.
So they do exist, but generally in our setting, in the African setting, a lot of people who are illiterate will not be able to understand even English.
So say a questionnaire is what is translated into,
Yes.
say, a vernacular language.
Yes.
When it's taken to the respondents,
Mm-hmm.
and someone is used to read to them,
Yeah.
then that becomes the schedule.
It's a questionnaire still.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a questionnaire. The thing that distinguishes the questionnaire and the schedule is the in-depth. It is longer and requires a lot of training. Whereas this questionnaire that you are reading out remains a questionnaire. The only reason you're reading out is because there is a challenge on the part of the respondent.
Okay.
All right. So a lot of times when we think that we are getting loyalty cards, we think that we are being given points, Nakumat or hiyo ilienda, or Quickmart or Naivas, people like those loyalty points. But essentially those are data collection cards. There is information they gather from you. If I always use my card when I shop, that card has my name, it has my age, it has my sex, and they are recording the kind of things that I'm consuming. And so they can be able to tell male of my age, what are the kind of things that they buy. So they can be able to tailor make adverts because they have a better understanding of what are the things that are fast moving for whatever age group. And it's very interesting how they organize supermarkets. One time we had somebody come and talk to us, and they told us that they always put milk and bread the farthest corner possible. And the reason is there are people whose desire when they enter supermarkets is to buy milk and bread, but why they put it far is so that that person will see other products on their way to seeing the milk and bread. Then they also talk about at what levels do they put the brands. You know, you have juices that are cheap, there are juices that are moderate priced, and there are juices that are expensive. So where do they place the cheap ones? Where do they place the expensive ones? Where do they put the moderate? And the cheap ones will be low. You have to bend very low. You will have back problems if you want to go cheap, because anything that is cheap usually will be stored very low. But the brands that are quality brands and fairly expensive will be put at the eye level. Then the ones that are moderate will be slightly higher. And again, those are things that they use to try and ensure they encourage you to buy certain things. Again, they are collecting data on you, and they know what your shopping habits are like. Next. Do we have a next? Okay, so when you want to collect secondary data, basically what we were highlighting from beginning until now was how you collect your primary data. And so it talked about experimental, about survey, and about observation. If it is secondary data, basically you'll need to go to all forms of published data. You can get publications from the government, Central Bureau of Statistics, publications from international bodies like WHO, UN, UNEP, UNICEF, they have their publications. Technical and trade journals, books, magazine, newspapers, reports, publications, reports by scholars or universities, and public records. So all these sources of info, secondary data that are available, a lot of them available freely. So if you want to use secondary data, you can go to these sources, collect your data, and you can further analyze it, looking for trends. Yeah, that is part of meta-analysis. So if you want to find out what is happening in a certain area, what is happening in suicide rates, how are the suicide rates been? So you can go look at journals that were done very long time ago, and what was the prevalence of suicide, for example, back in the day. Then you take a gap of 10 years, what was the prevalence, another gap. And so you can be able to draw a graph from other people's studies to show what has been the prevalence of suicide over time. So that is not one study that has been done, but it is you who is doing secondary analysis. It's called meta-analysis, just to see trends over time. So that's how you can play around with your secondary data. Next. So for you to use secondary data, one, it is important that the data is reliable. Who collected the data? So always look for data that has come from reliable sources. Remember, not everything that is available has been done well. We have a lot of people who push information. They publish information that is not necessarily quality information. So when you're collecting secondary data, ensure that you're getting it from credible sources. So ensure that it is reliable, it is suitable, and it is adequate. Yeah, so again, that is, normally we just tell people avoid predatory journals. Predatory journals are journals that are money making, and generally you will notice them. They have a lot of mistakes, a lot of spelling mistakes. You know, they just look funny. a lot of them will come from India, especially, and without hating India, but India will have quite a lot of them, and some funny places like the British Virgin Islands. I don't know why they like going to such dodgy areas. And so choose reliable data, because you want to, since it's secondary, your information, what you're processing or what you are meta-analyzing, can only be as good as how the primary data was. So if your primary data is bad, then your data or your results, your analysis will be bad simply because you collected poor data. Next. Yay, and we are done. Thank you. All right, let us hear. Any questions? Any quick questions? Unfortunately, I can't see everybody the way I was seeing them properly before. So for purposes of your study, we say you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you can get a questionnaire that has been done and is available online, you can use it for your study. So that is the questionnaire that you will put the appendices. However, in your chapter 3, you need to describe that questionnaire. And so you need to go to the source to determine what is its reliability and what is its validity. Questions? Questions? Am I talking to myself? Do I have anybody in this class?
Well, yes, sir.
Yes, we're here. Yes, we're here.
And how come you don't have questions? You're seated like you're listening to a radio station.
Doc, a question.
Yes, ma'am.
No. What if one wants to use a questionnaire in their study?
Please repeat. There was a call that was coming in.
Okay, so what if a person wants to use questionnaire in their study right now, the proposal that they're writing, but they can't find any online? Can they like come up with one?
Can you develop your own questionnaire? Is what you're asking?
Yes.
I suggest that you do not.
Okay, so when you're describing the method of data collection, you can still mention the issue of questionnaire, but fail to have something to show in the appendices.
No. You have to show a questionnaire in the appendices.
Wow, okay. Thank you.
So the easiest way to get a questionnaire, and that's my secret recipe of how to get questionnaires, is when you go to Google, you do the topic that you're doing, then you write thesis, then you write PDF.
Okay.
The reason is that any person who has done a thesis has to attach their questionnaire. So when you're searching, you search thesis, then PDF. When you go to the back of that thesis, you will get the questionnaire.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Another question? Yes, Amal.
Yeah, Prof. So I have a question about questionnaires in general. So in my experience, I've often seen certain questions to be more or less contradictory in the questionnaire. For example, if you want to ask someone how extroverted they are, so a question may be, I enjoy the company of many people, and then again, somewhere in the middle, it'll say, I do not enjoy it. So is that a common feature in many questionnaires? Is that also a form of deception?
Well, it is a form of a faking skill. So you're trying to see whether when they answered one question, they were faking. But those ones are embedded by the test constructors. There are times they can put questions that seem to say contradictory things. Then later they try and determine whether, depending on how you have answered those two questions, they can decide whether your questionnaire should be taken seriously or not.
Okay.
It's called a faking skill.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And it's interesting. You might have a question where you're asking people, have you ever had sex? And they say no. Then there are questions for people who said yes. Then the people who said no continue answering. And you ask how many partners, and they talk about partners. Then you're like, and yes, you had said you've never had sex. How come now you have multiple partners? Okay, Petronila Nyakanda.
Hello, sir. Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is, are we allowed to translate someone's questionnaire without consent from the author? Mm-hmm. Then the second one is, after translation, does the questionnaire still carry the same properties as before?
Good questions, excellent questions. One, the issue would be, is the questionnaire freely available? If the questionnaire is freely available online, then it makes sense to talk to the authors of the questionnaire, tell them that you have interest in doing that study in some local group somewhere, and part of what you're planning to do is to translate the questionnaire into a local language. Normally, such people would be very happy because it seems to them that you want to extend. There's a lot of joy. If that questionnaire is not available freely, so that you cannot Google that questionnaire and get it freely, then no. Talking to them, they will be very, very unhappy. They can sue you. Then onto the second question, where you're asking, does it retain the psychometric properties of the parent questionnaire if a questionnaire has been translated? One thing you need to find out from this questionnaire is how and where has it been used. If this questionnaire has been used in various different places, it has been used in Europe, it has been used in Asia, it has been used in other places in Africa, do they report the same psychometrics? Then if they report the same psychometrics, then you can assume it has cross-cultural validity. And so you can quote the psychometrics of the parent questionnaire. But if seemingly it has only been used in one place, and the one place is Europe, North America, then you'd need to find out what its validity and reliability is for your population.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, Faith Memaya.
Thank you. It's Faith Memia.
Okay.
Yes, so say you're doing a research design, correlational research design, and going with the example, let's see the relationship between parenting style and self-esteem. I'm imagining those are two questionnaires for measuring one looking into parenting style and the other one self-esteem. So in the appendices, are you attaching the two as separate, or are you going to combine? And then with the question you've answered, Petronila, the tip you've given us, the Google topic, thesis and PDF. Now that we are going to be attaching the questionnaire in the appendices, are we also going to indicate in the reference section where we got it from?
No.
Okay.
You just highlight the questionnaire. The thing about questionnaires is that quite a lot of questionnaires are not freely available. That is the truth. And that's why we are using a way to circumvent to get those questionnaires that are not freely available. we know that they will be attached in people's theses. Okay, so if you go for the freely available, you might have a very restricted number of questionnaires, but if you use that method of going through theses, you have a larger repertoire to choose from. Okay, and onto your first question, which I thought I remembered. Yes, if you use multiple questionnaires, report them as multiple questionnaires. So you'll have in Appendix 1, you have the self-concept questionnaire. Appendix 2, you have the parental whatever questionnaire. So you put them, you enumerate them, right? Faith Memia.
Yes.
Okay, but
Thank you.
I have not finished. When you're administering, your respondents don't need to know that there are two different questionnaires. So you combine them and you put them together. So when you're doing your document, you separate them, but when you're administering them to your respondents, you combine the questions and you give the questionnaire as one. Okay, Marguerite?
Thank you, Doc. I'm wondering, now considering right now we are actually adopting, let's say.
Okay, right now you are actually doing what?
Adopting, let's say, questionnaires, for instance, if that is what I'm to use in my study. Am I allowed to make changes to one that I decide to adopt? Take an example of probably having explained that my study is somewhere here in Nairobi, a school, maybe in Kasarani. The same questionnaire that I'm adopting was used probably in Nigeria or somewhere else in a different school. So am I allowed to make changes, or do I just attach it as an appendix, the way it is?
You have used one word and I want to give you two words. If you want to use a questionnaire as it is, you are adopting.
Okay.
If you realize the questionnaire would need to be tweaked, for example, it has used names of fruits that are not common, and so you'd want to change a few words here and there, then you are adapting. So when you adopt, you use it exactly as it is. If in your pilot you realize that if you use it as it is, it's going to have some challenges, you can change a few things and that you have adapted the questionnaire. If you adopt a questionnaire, you can talk of the psychometrics of the person who wrote it. If you adapt it, you have to determine the psychometrics yourself because you have made changes to the questionnaire.
Okay, yes, I get you. But now my question is heavily on the issue of probably the location of the study. Probably maybe it was reading research questionnaire, maybe in a school that is somewhere else, but you in your
No one calls a questionnaire with location because you're limiting its use.
Okay.
So a questionnaire is given the name of what it does. It's KABC, Kaufman's ABC questionnaire. You can have the BAI, that guy is called who? Anxiety Inventory. Ressler's scale, Ressler's intelligence scale for children. No one puts the name of the location on the questionnaire because they want it to have applicability across cultures, across groups. Yeah, it's only the title of the study that will have a location, but never the questionnaire.
Okay, I think maybe I'm not bringing it out clearly. There are some questionnaires that I actually came across while I was doing my undergraduate. So basically, I think they were giving a brief history of what the questionnaire is for, where I don't know whether you've come across that, where they're explaining to the participant that this is happening
That is not a questionnaire. That is the intro. You have to introduce yourself. So as a cover to the questionnaire, you start with my name is Margari Oyo. I am an MA student in USIU. That's not the questionnaire. That's just a cover letter for the questionnaire.
Okay, so in the cover letter, that is exactly what I wanted to ask actually. So if we are to adapt a questionnaire, that bit of the cover letter we can actually just
you use your name. You put your name and what it is that you're doing. You're a master student doing clinical in USIU, and what is your intent? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Amal.
Yes, hi, Prof. So I was looking at the layout for chapter 3, and then it states in, I think, 3.61, a pilot study. So are we supposed to do a pilot study for our proposal?
No, there's nothing you're going to do. You won't collect data and you won't do the pilot, but
No,
you
I
will need to.
understand, but do we have to write anything in there?
Yes. And the reason you want to pilot your instrument is because you have not used it. You want to ensure that it's going to be understood by your respondents. There's nothing as bad as you have done all the work that you've done, then you go to the ground and they can't understand it. So a pilot just ensures that your document can fly.
Okay.
All right. Good questions. Yes, Petronila.
Yes, sir. Just to add on the issue of pilot, I think it's under research procedure. Under research procedure, are we talking about the steps that we are going to take undertaking the research? What exactly are we focusing on?
As highlighted on the layout, please follow the layout to the letter. So if it's the procedure, so what procedures do you follow? What precedes the other? What do you do first? What are the research steps?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Then also sorry, you can go ahead.
No, just go ahead.
Okay, my other question, this one is a bit personal. I have one research question which requires me to predict, like depression predict marital satisfaction. Can I use correlation analysis, or I can use
when you're predicting, you use regression.
Okay. So regression, is it under correlation or it's under another form of analysis?
It's an extension of the correlation.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other hand that is up that I cannot see? Okay. So many thanks. So we'll close it here. Who was recording? Yvonne.
Yes, I was.
Oh, okay. So what will you do with the recording?
You tell me, but I was presuming it's saved on my laptop, so I was going to share it on the WhatsApp group. But you can let me know.
Do you know how to convert it into YouTube material?
No, but I can find out.
Okay, sawa. All righty, and thank you for saving the day for me. And many thanks. I hope that the people who came to class were able to write the attendance on the chat before we came to a standstill, because once I get my power, I'll be able to get that info back. Otherwise, have a beautiful night. Now, I am going to jump next week. Next week, I have nothing to teach. I will only do consultation. I am back to the office next week. So in case you have issues that need quick consultation, please talk to me. But basically from now, we want to finish the writing of the document. I don't know what happened. Are you there?
We're here.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Hey, today computers in the shida. So next week will be for, which word did I use? Consultation. So we don't have a class, but I'll be open for consultation. If you have issues that you have bumped into, that you have questions for, I'll be open for that. Then the document will be ready the other week, which is week 13. So week 13, we shall meet and I'll just be giving you an idea of how the exam will be. But basically that's the time you will be submitting the final proposal.
Doc, when you say you will not, what? When you say you have nothing to teach, but you'll be available for consultation, are we actually to come to sign in class, or
No.
or is it consultation via emails? And
No, consultation for the people who have issues.
Okay.
So I will log in, but you don't need to come in if you don't have issues.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Amal?
Sorry, one last question. So for the sample size, do we have to cite where we got that number from?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Gone. Okay, have a beautiful night and thank you. We shall see you, God willing, week 13, which is next Tuesday, but 1. But if you have an issue, we shall have a clinic. I will walk into the clinic on Tuesday for people who have issues.
Okay, sir.